revolutions. These people roll like the Marxists. They roll like the Bolsheviks. They roll like the revolutionaries in France. And it's going to be, we got a very tough, long fight. Don't think this is going to be easy. And don't think by going on Fox News and saying, oh, they're communist. When kids right now, under 40, the approval of capitalism is so low. And here's the reason. We have a capitalist system with no capitalists. 80% of the people don't have a piece of the action. And if you don't have a piece of the action, why are you going to support capitalism? So we have a tough fight ahead of us.
Well, but I know we're into your hour. Just wanted to hat tip as a good long-time guest and frequent guest of yours, Sam Faddis, passing. Surprisingly, yeah. Did you know he was sick, as sick as he was, and because it was a shock to me.
Very, very, very quick. It started as he was sick and he was going to be scheduled. He came on late in June. He was going to be scheduled for our 4th of July special, so he wasn't feeling well. Next thing you know, he's in the hospital. Next thing you know, he's being transferred for major surgery. Next thing you know, he's dead. So you got to be, on these situations, you got to be very, very careful. You got to be very careful about your health. He was a great patriot and really a great man. Good man. Really enjoyed. Short time, didn't know him very well until late, maybe about a year or so, watching him on War Room. Steve, have a great show. Good talking to you, and we'll see you very soon. Thank you. Appreciate you, Eric. Yeah, we'll be back tomorrow. We got Fauci in the morning, but we're going to get back into the regular string of things. We're here to do a 2-hour special. I'm going to tell you, we're actually going to do, already I can tell you the number of people we have to get on in the footage, the incredible footage the team's been able to pull together over the 6 years that Sam has been coming on the show. It's just been incredible. What I want to do is play the opening introduction that Real America's Voice was so great to put together. Then I'll come back and tee this up. We're going to spend and by the way, we're going to talk about current events that happened today, because so much of what Sam shared with us and was a contributor and often a co-host, particularly when I was in prison, were the two of the most vital things that are driving this: the stolen election and the grassroots effort in building MAGA, and also staying out of these eternal wars. Let's start with the overall introduction put together by the team at Real America's Voice. Sam Faddis passed away on Saturday evening. If anybody's virtually almost irreplaceable here in the War Room, Sam would be one of the key elements. Such a great job of representing patriots in the MAGA movement from the early days of the steal in 2020. Sam had so many years of experience in Iran, in the Middle East. He was unique, I think, among people coming on TV or radio. But God's will was he would leave us, and he would leave us on Saturday night, but he will live with us forever.
Sam Faddis, it's great to have you with us.
Retired CIA officer Sam Faddis, good friend of the program.
My friend Sam Faddis, what a great friend of the show, great friend of the network, also really, really smart guy.
Former CIA operative. Sam, I want to bring you into this.
Sam Faddis, I know you have some thoughts, probably some great writing too on everything going on.
If I had been in a position to advise the president before this war started, my advice would have been, don't do this, don't start this war. This is a very bad idea.
Tell us what your thoughts are.
Send in the U.S. Navy, put boarding parties on board, all 40 of them, take all of their oil and take all of their tankers and apply all that money to the cost of the war and give it to the American taxpayers.
Israelis are saying right now is that this thing's a non-starter. And when they look at the 10 points and they're getting their nose rubbed in this, they're actually, from their perspective, correct, are they not?
This is a surrender document. There's no way in hell we can agree to this thing.
What are your thoughts on what you're seeing right now, from what the president has said to now Iran's response?
I would say, from long experience with the Iranians, don't pop any champagne corks.
Sam, your advice to the president:
do not release any pressure we have on these people. Squeeze them and let them sit and be crushed under that pressure.
The region is never going to be stable given its nature. Am I wrong in that, sir?
Amen, Steve. Look, stop trying to fix all of this. If they ever want to work it out, they can work it out, but we're not going to fix it. And look, I'm just going to say this. Jolani, head of, the guy who runs Syria now, the guy's Al-Qaeda. Okay, I get it, he wears a suit now, and he claims he's not part of Al-Qaeda anymore. Inviting the Al-Qaeda Sunni extremists from Syria to go fight the Shia extremist crazy people in Lebanon is not going to fix the problem. Those guys have been at war for 1,500 years over the question of who gets to succeed the prophet. and they're going to keep fighting forever, and it's not going to make it better to turn them on each other. They already do that enough on their own.
There never was a Pennsylvania patriot like Sam Faddis who could quite do it all the way that he did.
It's kind of breathtaking of how prescient Sam Faddis was, not simply a good man and a patriot that dedicated his life to his country, but somebody that had really the ability to look downrange, just an extraordinary individual.
It's Tuesday, 28 July, year of our Lord 2026. Join us now. We're going to spend a couple hours playing clips of Sam Faddis and some of his better hits on the show. I guess all of them were great. We've hopefully curated, but we got so many. This is why we're going to have to do at least another hour. Maybe I just do another hour of clips where I give commentary. But we've also got many people from worked in the Patriot organizations with Sam that we want to get on here too, because that was a major aspect. In fact, Sam first joined the show talking about Pennsylvania. I've got Natalie G. Winters, Jack Posobiec, and Dr. Bradley Thayer. Natalie, let me start with you. We're going to play a bunch of clips, and we've got commercial breaks, so I've got to make sure we don't get too chopped up here. But particularly over the years, yes, but particularly when I went to federal prison and Next Man Up, and you kind of jumped in with Mo and Grace and kind of took command, which I was very proud of, with no instructions. Just, hey, it's yours. You figure it out. Sam was a very important part of the program to get us through, was he not?
Well, look, I think everybody here knows, remembers, and frankly misses Sam as just a wonderful guest. He was right. He was right because of his lived experience, as you would say, just an honorable and a good man. But what people didn't get to see was him behind the camera. And there are so many guests. We love all our guests here in the War Room, but are just so easy to work with. And they're okay sitting for the whole entire show, and they don't get mad if you don't come to them right away. I am sometimes myself guilty of that. And Sam was just the easiest to work with. A, he was always available, always willing to help. He would sit through my opening rants until I got to him in B block. And Steve, I think the timing where we are celebrating what a wonderful...
She froze. Okay, we're going to get her unfrozen in a second, but absolutely know what she's talking about with Sam. It was always, he could do it. It was like you didn't need to prep him on the topic or talk beforehand or do any kind of pre-interview. Jack Posobiec, one of the reasons I think Sam was so important, his lived experience, and particularly, I'll do the obit in a second that's up on And magazine. It's really terrific, but his experience really fighting with the Kurds or leading the Kurds back in the Iraq War, his deep knowledge of Iran and the Persians, and his knowledge, when he first started coming on, I go, Sam Faddis, he was with these patriot groups working with Pennsylvania. And I said, gosh, is this the guy that wrote this? He wrote an amazing book about the CIA, Decline and Fall of the CIA, I think back in like 2006, 2007, 2008, sometime like that. So he just had a deep knowledge of geopolitics, strategy, but also how it was applied. I mean, this guy was a deck plates guy. He wasn't at some university or CSIS theoretically doing white papers. He was actually out fighting with the Kurds right in northern Iraq during that very brutal war. Your thoughts as a naval intelligence officer?
Yeah, Steve, as they would say in Langley, this guy was ground branch through and through. All right, he was not one of the analysts back in the office. He was not an office guy. And I was actually kind of reflecting the fact that for Faddis, it's one of the strange things, and it's similar to the creation of War Room itself, where I've always said that, in a weird way, it was COVID and 2020 and so many things that brought us the War Room. And Steve, you always said that, 2020 was providential, and it's always been, at the time, I guess, it was our biggest disagreement. And I said, what do you mean providential? I mean, this is awful. Trump's out of office and we're throwing you in jail and all this terrible stuff is happening because you saw that it was God giving us an opportunity to pivot as a country. And so many patriots crawled out of the woodwork and were activated by the events of 2020. And one of those in Pennsylvania, of course, was Sam Faddis. And he had the Unite PA. He came out, I think it was, originally the COVID policies that he first started getting involved in. And then he had Pennsylvania Patriot Coalition. And of course, that massive, massive event that he spoke at, calling upon Governor Josh Shapiro to repeal Act 77, really just castigating the Republicans in the Pennsylvania state legislature up there in Harrisburg for passing acts. This was the universal mail-in ballots and all the rest in Pennsylvania that the Republicans passed without any, real debate or consultation. And that's kind of what got him more activated. And then, of course, we, became much more aware of him through his work and through his CIA work and going back into his geopolitical knowledge. But, I still go back to that moment of saying that if we hadn't passed through that cauldron, if we hadn't passed through all of that in 2020, 2021, then so much of this would not have happened. And, you call it the fourth turning, which obviously we're in right now. You call it so many different things, but history played out for a reason. It had to be this way, and it had to be Sam Faddis.
I want to stick with that for a moment because, we first met Sam when he was the leader of these patriot movements and leaders of really these MAGA grassroots movements in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, with Mastriano.
Central. Mastriano and all of them. And talk about Act 77, because very early on people realized that, hey, if you change the Constitution and you don't really change it, but you change it, you could have a very different outcome than it had. And we saw that. I mean, we saw that at night when we went to bed that night with Sam Faddis had warned us about Trump was up by, 800,000 or 900,000 ballots in Pennsylvania. And all of a sudden he starts loose. And as soon as they called Pennsylvania on Saturday afternoon, they essentially gave the presidency to Joe Biden. Sam Faddis was months ahead of that and really became a leader in the MAGA movement because of that. Walk me through that.
Well, yeah, so Act 77, that was, of course, no excuse mail-in ballots. And prior to that, it was, mail-in ballots meant you were out of the state or you had work and you absolutely couldn't appear at your polling place in person, or like me, you would be deployed in the military to a variety of places around the world. And so you physically weren't going to be anywhere in the Commonwealth on Election Day. So, of course, military mail-in ballots are something that I utilized on a variety of occasions, many, many occasions, right, when I was deployed somewhere in the world. And Act 77 came in, and keep in mind, by the way, that Act 77 actually predated COVID. It actually predated COVID. And remember, Josh Shapiro was Attorney General back when this came in, but it predated COVID, and it was a rare exception to that where Republicans had just kind of gone all in with the Democrats in Pennsylvania, which they do on they certainly have a habit of doing so up in Pennsylvania, which is something that I've been fighting about for years with them on. And Faddis was one of the early guys saying, you guys can't do this. If you do this, you will completely lose all integrity of your elections. You will lose the ability to audit. You will lose the ability to have an understanding of who's actually voting in your elections. And then, of course, you had guys like Al Schmidt out of Philadelphia, the traitor Republican, who we helped get elected in in Philadelphia, and then he later became the statewide appointed, head of elections in Pennsylvania under Shapiro because he went in with his buddy Josh Shapiro. That they just completely ran roughshod over all of this, but all the while we're going up on Jake Tapper's show and saying everything's fine, everything's good. Another one of their buddies, by the way, that everything is great, everything's wonderful. And it was guys like Sam Faddis and Doug Mastriano and so many others saying this is going to lead to massive problems. This is going to lead to massive fraud. This cannot be audited. This is not going to reflect the will of the people of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
That hard-headed, common-sense realism, what he brought to discussions of geopolitics, national security, the Middle East, MAGA politics, the guy was a complete package. And not just that, stepped into the breach and took leadership, just didn't talk about it. Jack, hang on for a second, we got Doctor there. We're packed for the next 2 hours. We're actually going to do another hour probably later this week on Saturday. The reason is we got so many great clips, great remembrances. But most importantly, it's what Sam leaves us with that we need to work with about the country today and in the future. Short break.
War Room. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
We've got Natalie back up by audio. Let me start with Jack. I'll go to Natalie. Dr. Thayer is also with us, and I'm going to play a bunch of clips. Jack, just think about it. The last couple of days, we have Zelensky in the morning. Then, right following that, is the Prime Minister of Israel, Netanyahu. Then they go to have from Capitol Hill, where they have a memorial service, they go to have a funeral at National Cathedral, where the president talks about Lindsey Graham, the great neocon. And then tomorrow, we're going to be covering on the show live the Inquisition of Fauci, particularly breaking the Fauci diaries. It had been a perfect moment for Sam, right? Because he was involved in so much of this stuff. Your thoughts of just having this intensity at the very moment that Sam Faddis leaves us.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what I was touching on. This is truly the fourth turning that we're in, and guys like Sam Sam Faddis was the kind of guy who could see around corners. He was the kind of guy who could tell you what was coming down a dark alleyway and what to be ready for. And those are the type of guys that you need when it comes to your daily analysis, your daily media diet, your daily geopolitical updates, right? All of those things come into play because here we are sitting, the president absolutely at that inflection point that we're clearly at this inflection point where, and everybody sees it now, where Netanyahu and Zelensky clearly, I think more Zelensky is driving this, trying to combine and unite the military efforts in both Ukraine and vis-a-vis Iran. It doesn't seem as though they've gotten much headway there with the meetings, but of course, so much of that remains to be seen because they were closed to press. And we saw that the president did not give them sort of the state greeting as he has done in the past out of the West Wing portico. They both came in behind those using the side door. The president did not come out to greet them. They're on the lower level, that entrance there around the side of where the Navy mess is on the West Wing. And so, it's so clear that if this were to metastasize into a larger conflict, that a guy like Sam Faddis would exactly be the type of person to be able to lead us through that and to explain what all the issues therein might be. Does Russia get in, and I think the biggest question of all being there is, does Russia get involved directly in conflict with the United States Navy if Ukraine is attacking? Ukraine is attacking directly. You mean in the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, places like that? Precisely. So what happened? How do the Russians respond if their own ships are taking hits in the Caspian? Do the Iranians get involved in more belligerency? And by the way, nobody's looking at this from the other perspective too. What happens if Iran wanted to send some more conflict in other directions as well? What if they wanted to send IRGC operatives to other regions of the world? And keep in mind, if Europe is trying to get involved in the Middle East, we could see the Middle East get directly involved in Europe. And far be it for me to go full neocon, but if there are these sleeper cells that we keep hearing about in Europe or the United States, that's exactly the kind of time that you would want to start activating them. Before I go to Natalie, I want to talk about Netanyahu. I was quoted this morning in the Politico as kind of their tee-up piece. It was a great article, Steve. I like that. I like that article. Well, I want to talk about it because I think and this gets back to Sam and his work with the America First and the Patriot groups in Pennsylvania, and someone that knew something about geopolitics. I think from America, what I said was very simply, is that and Netanyahu has been working on this meeting, try to get it. And if it hadn't been for Lindsey Graham's demise, I'm not sure he would have had a meeting anytime. This is the first. I believe this is the first visit since the war's begun. This is the first visit since the couple of days before the war, where they had that big meeting, and we know from the New York Times article, the New York Times leak, in the Maggie Haberman book, and other things that. It was presented. I think the intelligence that was presented there, and Sam was pretty adamant,
was not exquisite intelligence.
But was
right?
was Netanyahu there in person, or was he piped in from Tel Aviv?
No, I think Netanyahu came in person right before the war. There was the very last meetings, I think, right before the war. Because the war started, I think, the 27th or 28th. I believe he came, it was in person. His last meetings were right before the war started.
You mean the Situation Room one?
Yes. This is where they had the one that really, I think, outlined the initial stages of the war and the coordinated attacks. Remember, they were talking about how coordinated it was. But what I said is that where we stand today, from the first 18 months of this, Netanyahu's had more visits with the commander-in-chief, twice as many at least as Churchill had in all of World War II. And from America First position, every time he visits, it gets worse and worse and worse. I mean, for Israel first, it's fine. And this is my point. Israel, if they don't want to be a vassal state, and I understand his campaign, he's taking real umbrage with that, protectorate and being a vassal state. If you don't want to be a vassal state and you don't want to be a protectorate and have to take direction from the United States, like, yes, you're not going to go to Beirut, then it's time to stand on your own. If you stand on your own, you're your own independent country, right? And that means no Section 219. It means no 10-year MOU. Just stand up and stand and deliver and go to Beirut, go to Damascus, go to Tehran, go where you want to go. But I think it's resonating because it's getting passed around, and people don't realize that we've had people that we truly had alliances with and fought the biggest war in world history. And even that, you don't have the type of one-on-one, because he can work the refs when he's here. He's very good at that. He's very good in these meetings. You saw last night, I put up photos today. Mark Wayne Mullen, we had your co-author, right, who lives in Ohio, Lysick, came on and really had our heads exploding the first part of the show today, talking about the Haitians that are not leaving. You had a picture with Mark Wayne Mullen last night partying with, shouldn't say partying, but at a dinner commemorating Lindsey Graham with Netanyahu right next to him instead of doing his job. And I think this just reinforces for the America First people, of which Sam was a tremendous leader in our key state, Pennsylvania, that right now we're just not that America First.
Well, and I'll even add that what Joshua is doing with citizens, or Haitians of Springfield, is that he's actually started kind of a patriot movement almost there in Ohio, just like Sam Faddis was doing in Pennsylvania, because they've taken a local issue that has, of course, national underpinnings, and they've now formed a cadre around it. So they're using his book, and local media is now attacking Joshua for even writing Haitians of Springfield. It hasn't even come out yet. But he's holding meetings. He's getting people together. They're forming an entire local unit all around this to again, peacefully and patriotically document what is happening to their community, because this is where he lives. This is where he's born and raised. And to have 15,000 Haitians dropped on their heads out of nowhere is something that's absolutely been devastating to the community. And he's simply expressing the truth about what's going on down on the ground, the same way that Sam Faddis was doing so there. And Steve, by the way, one of the things that you mentioned on the geopolitical front that I think people have to realize too is that, and you're right, that Bibi did meet with the president just before the bombing run, before the State of the Union even, back in February. But something that I think a lot of people need to realize is that this is an election year for Israel as well as for the United States. And Naftali Bennett of the Together Party is pushing really, really hard to usurp Bibi as prime minister. So Bibi meeting with Trump it stands for his own political standing, where he's trying to keep his coalition together there in Tel Aviv because he wants to stay in office. And their election's in October. So we're talking just about I'm going to look up the actual date here, October 27th. So it's about 3 months from the day is him going out. And this is going to be something, of course, President Trump is still well-liked in Israel. He's very popular in Israel. So this is going to be something where Netanyahu wants this thing to continue, right? It's in his interest politically and geopolitically to keep the conflict going through the election so that he can use a similar George W. Bush strategy of saying, hey, you don't change horses midstream. I'm in this with with President Trump. I've got the relationship with him. Natalie Bennett, a younger guy, he's coming at Bibi from the right. He doesn't have that same level of a relationship with President Trump as well as he does. So that's one of the key reasons that he wants to keep this going. And again, these are just differing interests that the United States are geopolitically and the Republican Party politically have when it comes to Israel and Bibi Netanyahu.
Well, he's also, I mean, one of the pitches too is that he's the best at directing the Americans. He's the one that can keep the Americans in this war. He's the one that can get the Americans to basically support regime change when we were there just for the nuclear program. Remember, President Trump, we had total obliteration of the nuclear program. And yes, some elements were left over, but that certainly wouldn't require the type of military effort that started this war, right? Which those first couple of days was a decapitation. And we know from the footage that's out there with Lindsey Graham, they're skipping around selling what the Mossad, pushing what the Mossad was selling, that, hey, it's a 72-hour strategic bombing run, and then the country's going to overthrow the mullahs, sir.
Steve, have you seen the clip that came out, I guess, last evening from this Lindsey Graham footage? And I didn't want to post it up today during the man's funeral, just out of respect as a fellow American. But the footage that's come out now, and now that it's done, I think we should be talking about it, is that he was upset with the president for going, and this is, I guess, the early stages of the Memorandum of Understanding, the MOU, that he was upset with the president for calling off the strikes, for de-escalating, and wanting to move towards a rapprochement with Iran on the entire situation. And he was talking about how, you know, he said the president had him on on the ropes. I don't understand why he's doing this. There's no discussion whatsoever about the material shortages that we were running into in terms of our interceptors, in terms of the Patriot missile batteries. He wasn't talking about how the Gulf allies were getting pounded. There was no discussion of this whatsoever. Now, we hear that President Trump said this morning, if you listen to his interview,
hang on one second. We'll
Lindsey
take a short commercial break. Back in a moment.
War Room. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Jack, you want to finish that thought, sir?
Yeah, exactly. So Steve, when you're looking at this, President Trump also. So yeah, we have this clip, and I'll send it to the engine room of Lindsey Graham, you know, coming out and he's saying that Trump has let this thing slip away. We've had them on the ropes, and his indecision is coming back to haunt us. So one of the final interviews that we have, and we know he's on film, is him criticizing President Trump. But what did President Trump then say on Fox and Friends when he gave that interview? He called in this morning. He said that one of the last things that Lindsey Graham ever said to him was that it's time to make a deal with Iran. So I don't know if this was a deathbed final wishes.
Hold it. Hang on. What the president said? Lindsey said what?
Well, Steve, now you're not going to go and contradict the president of the United States, are you?
I am not.
Because the president of the United States, Donald J. Trump, just told me that Lindsey Graham said he wanted to deal with the Iranians, and he said it on his deathbed.
Okay.
Steve. I know you're not going to call the president of the United States a liar, Steve.
No, I am certainly not. I just don't watch Fox and Friends. I'm glad to get that information.
I had the great Carly Bonet. The great Carly Bonet clipped it, and I got to see it on the Midnight Rider. Shout out to the Midnight Rider posse.
Midnight Rider. Hang on for 1 second. Natalie, the irony of having Netanyahu and Zelensky in discussion about potentially, which Sam warned us about, connecting these two wars through the Caspian or Black Sea, or these two fronts, I should say, in the Caspian and Black Sea, what that would do to us, plus having the president giving one of the eulogies for Lindsey Graham, and tomorrow morning having now the revelations of the Fauci diaries, and going to have Fauci hopefully held account, at least in this Senate hearing, and then hopefully later, maybe with a criminal referral. Your thoughts, ma'am?
Well, you might find it ironic. To me, I think you just described my nightmare. It's horrific. I mean, look, how is the priority, especially today, after the speech that President Trump gave about PRC influence in the United States, How is it not China, right? And I think when you put the kind of meta layer on top of the actual substance of what's happening, but the commentariat, right, the analysis that we're hearing from the so-called experts, right, the Faucis of the world, people like Sam Faddis, they actually have done things, they actually know what they're talking about. But it really, I think, exposes how these experts, whether they're the media talking heads, the, State Department betters, especially under the Biden regime, the people that really got us into this Ukraine conflict in the first place, that they're actually not the experts, right? But I think there's an interesting convergence with what we have been talking about in the war room forever, which is what is actually putting America first. And you're sort of seeing how the pushback to that, yes, it's the typical neocon dribble and tropes that we're used to, but there also really is a coordinated foreign influence element to this as well. This is obviously something we've been getting into, even what you were talking about this morning with Nick Cleveland's Stout, right? And I think the key point here, even like Jack was talking about with Netanyahu's reelection, every war may be existential to the country that is fighting it, but that doesn't make every war existential to the United States. And I think you have to look at this through the lens of, frankly, our actual existential threat, which is, of course, China, and how they are essentially watching this as kind of a live fire exercise, not just gathering more data on the United States, making it more likely that they can prevail kinetically, but also really, really quite enjoying us find and discover new graveyards of empires. And I think what's really interesting and almost a slap in the face, I mean, perhaps there's an upside, but I'll believe it when I see it. But is the discussion, right, of the Patriot interceptors going to Ukraine, co-producing, co-developing, where it's so clear now that the real battle in all of this really has become the factory floor, right? The defense industrial base, the ability to actually build these exquisite systems that we're talking about. I mean, the numbers are staggering, not just the delays in orders of magnitude involving years, but one Chinese company alone in 2024 literally built more commercial ships than the entire US shipbuilding industry has built since World War II. And obviously, a big part of what Zelensky was talking about when he was over here was this idea of co-producing the Patriots, stuff like that. But I think these conflicts are also quite interesting to have both of these people coming at the same time, because it's such a split screen of what modern warfare has become, right? Ukraine is such an example of these cheap drones, right? Attritable drones, electronic warfare, stuff like that, where you need or you don't need, right, these massive exquisite systems, whereas you have in the Middle East side, sort of the opposite side of the coin, right, where we're seeing the United States rapidly deplete to a tune that we can't even repeat on this program. I think a lot of the numbers are classified, but it's quite alarming what's publicly available. But you're seeing that you need these really, really expensive, in some cases, $billion systems to take down a, couple $1,000 drone. So it's quite interesting. But I think that there's an interesting loop here too, right? Obviously, these foreign leaders are coming over here. It's propaganda. They want to internationalize and make, their threats that find common cause with Americans. But it's just more of basically socializing, right, the costs of war and making it Americans' responsibility to subsidize these never-ending conflicts where, sure, maybe there's a marginal benefit if it actually works out successfully. Maybe, but in the order of priorities, it's not a 100% alignment with Ukraine or Israel. And, you talk about, the rise of socialism and DSA and all this stuff. I mean, our foreign policy is all about socializing risk. Usually we're talking about that in the form of, government bailouts for companies and stuff like that. But in this case, there's such a through line there where what is the ROI for the American people continuing to shell out billions of dollars for these countries who seem to not really care when Americans die defending their borders? And then they have the nerve, right, to come here and sort of make demands for even more exquisite weaponry and cheap drones, stuff like that, when they're sort of the reason in the first place that we're literally having to make military decisions based off of our stockpiles, a position that the United States, the home of building and manufacturing superpower, has never been in. So I don't understand why we're being bossed around by these countries. I mean, a protectorate is certainly not an ally. And an ally is certainly not a sovereign. And sometimes, you see these pictures of everybody in the administration going to like every country except touring the United States. I saw, Judge Jeanine Pirro in the Philippines, and, Cash is obviously in China. You have so many of these foreign meetings, so many of these focuses on these external conflicts that provide basically no demonstrable benefit to anything here at home. And I would just say the polling, as you had that Politico reporter on a few days ago, shows that the stuff going on in Iran is extremely unpopular. Ukraine, even more so. I mean, the numbers are probably similar to like Saddam Hussein levels of disapproval. If bad polling was enough to get mass deportations pulled, and now we can only go after, the worst of the worst of the worst of the worst of the worst, then bad polling should be enough to get us out of these conflicts too. And by the way, the bad polling on this kind of stuff has much longer longevity than the mass deportation stuff. And by the way, those polls are fake. That's what Americans actually voted for. So there just seems to be this double standard. Obviously, so much of it can be attributed to foreign influence and these lobbying firms and stuff like that. But I think it's unfortunate to see. It's straying from America first. It's not really that complicated to define. And the defense industrial base is something that really needs to be paid attention to. And we don't have the resources to keep shelling out to other countries. We just don't.
In fact, the defense industrial base, now we're going to share it with Israel. We'll get more on that later. Let's play a clip. I got Dr. There. I got other people going to join us at 6. Let's play a couple of clips. Can we do that? Of Sam Faddis. I think these are some of the earlier hits.
Talk to us about Pennsylvania.
Yeah, Pennsylvania is at least as bad. Surrender, capitulation. You got the rank and file fired up. They want to know how the heck we went into November and allowed this to happen, and they expect it to be fixed. And the official word from the PA GOP is that they will make no steps, take no action to attempt to repeal Act 77, which is what took us to no excuse mail-in voting. They will not attempt to do it. The official word from PA GOP is we will have to live with it, and we may tinker around the edges. So you got the rank and file ready to storm the castle, and the establishment is announcing that they're going to do nothing.
So, Sam, are the grassroots getting the information up there that understand that the fix is in with the Republican establishment?
Well, yeah. Are they getting the word? They're getting the word now, and they are beginning to organize. But, I think they are still grasping the scope of the betrayal, if I can use that word. I mean, you have let's keep in mind, a Republican-controlled House and Senate in Harrisburg. We have the majority. That bill and this legislature has been back in session for weeks. The repeal of Act 77 should have already happened. And in fact, they're not even making an attempt to do it. They're ignoring the rank and file at this point. So, yeah, people are bubbling up at the grassroots level, but that's what's got to happen.
But this is what I don't understand. Just from practical politics, this is what I don't get. And looking at Georgia, and the 300,000 didn't show up because they said, hey, if you're going to steal elections, I'm not showing up. I'm not ringing doorbells. They have a Senate race in 22 that could determine we got to hold Pennsylvania, or you ain't going to have a shot at taking this thing back. You must hold Pennsylvania, given what the math looks like, right?
Yes.
But we need new blood in Ohio, in Missouri, in Pennsylvania. We need new blood in these places. In South Dakota, we need new blood, okay? But you got to hold that seat. How do they anticipate? When you talk to this, how does the establishment anticipate they're going to motivate the MAGA voters plus the grassroots to turn out and do the hard work? Because this is going to be as tough a fight as you got to hold that seat in Pennsylvania. How are they going to do it with the mail-in ballots?
Well, they're not going to do it. They're still struggling with reality, obviously. Toomey, who's the guy who's stepping down in won't run again in 22 that you're talking about, U.S. Senator, is one of the 7 guys who voted to impeach Donald Trump. Didn't just vote to hear the case, voted to impeach it. If you're not careful, you will have a guy who is indistinguishable ideologically from Toomey step into that role. Either that or they'll just flat out lose to the Democrats. But at this point, the establishment's plan is apparently to trot out somebody who will be just another Senator Toomey. That's where we are.
Jack Posobiec, son of Pennsylvania. Sam Faddis had a pretty good feel for the place. Is that fire right there?
I love it. I love it. And yeah, comparing him to Senator Toomey, who's one of these guys who, similar to, Bob Casey in a lot of ways, who was a Pennsylvania senator concurrently with him. It's, he was a Republican that we put up, Casey, a Democrat, of course. But, Toomey was a guy we put up. He had run for governor in the past. He was, the head of Club for Growth. And, people were saying, oh, it's going to be so amazing having him as a senator. And then, it's like, what did he even do? What did he even do for all those years that we put him in the United States Senate? And by the way, gosh, I would say the same thing about most of the senators right now. Not all, but a fair amount of them, because they just don't seem to get anything done. And Sam Faddis understood that if you wanted to stand for election, if you were standing in a tough midterm season, then you've got to tell voters, what are you doing for us right now? Not what you did years ago, not what you did in the past, not, oh, we fought and we held back this. No. What are you doing for the voters right now? Because the DSA out there, they're walking around saying, hey, we're going to give you free food, and we're going to give you all this health care, we're going to give you all the rest, and we're going to go after Trump and all this stuff. They're promising things. Republicans in the Senate, Republicans in the Congress, haven't seen it.
Jack, if you can, and Natalie can hang on for 1 second, we're going to do a short commercial break. I want to thank Birch Gold for sponsoring today. Birchgold.com. Take your phone out, text Bannon at 989898. Given what capital markets, equity and bond markets are doing over in Asia, what they're doing here in the United States about this bet on artificial intelligence, now more than ever, you should talk to Philip Patrick and the team about the benefits of hedging by owning physical gold. Bannon, B-A-N-N-O-N, 989898. Get the ultimate guide for investing in gold and precious metals in the age of Trump today. Take advantage of that.
War Room. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
I was going to play another clip, but I got to ask Natalie and Poso. Sam Faddis looked like a movie star. That was a clip, I think, from 6 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago. Sam Faddis looks like a movie star. I'd look like hell, just to be blunt. Natalie, what Sam Faddis always looked camera ready, looked like somebody at a central casting, CIA operative, a Sean Connery, James Bond type. I look like living hell in that photo, man. Who pulled that clip? I'm not loving that clip. Natalie Winters, your thoughts?
Well, I won't say you look like hell. To be fair, you did go through hell. You went to Danbury, which I think is maybe proof that the lawfare that MAGA has gone through is maybe worse than what Sam Faddis had to deal with when he went to Iraq and aged just more. But no, he looks the same. I even feel like I look older. But like I was saying, I think before I cut out in the earlier part, he was the best guest to have on. He would sit patiently even when we didn't get to him on time. He would listen. He was so respectful. And I know everyone doesn't get to see the behind the camera part. And there are a lot of people who have a lot of attitudes in this business. But he really was just a good man, a team player, and he will be very missed. So he definitely will not be forgotten.
A good man and a team player. Jack Posobiec, from that last clip, your thoughts. That was back, I think, early 2021. When Sam Faddis started becoming a regular on the show about Pennsylvania, man, we weren't talking geopolitics. We were talking saving the Union through saving the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, sir.
Yeah, Steve, I'd definitely love to be getting back to talking about saving the Union and saving Pennsylvania one of these days. And who knows, perhaps we'll be able to get there soon. But Sam Faddis was that rare breed of American who could do it all. He could go from the super high heights of geopolitics and international politics all the way down to the granular level of talking about what was happening in one polling place at one precinct with one election official. And that just spoke to the depth and breadth of his expertise and his intelligence. And my gosh, imagine if we had a country full of Sam Faddises. And I believe that we do. And I believe that in so many places in the country, we do have Sam Faddises all over, particularly in the Rust Belt, the Midwest, where there are so many people who are just overlooked in terms of their intelligence because they didn't come from one of the, the Ivy Towers. They didn't come from one of the cosmopolitan centers of the country. But you've got so many people like Sam Faddis that are just sitting there right in America's heartland. And the globalists have overlooked them for so long and constantly put the interests of financialization, the interests of globalization before those of the American people, and they don't care. They don't care about the Sam Faddises, and that's why a guy like Sam Faddis, who, by the way, should be running places like the CIA, that's why a guy like that was pushed back to the farmlands of Pennsylvania.
Yes. How did he, given as many years he spent out of the country, and a lot of those years undercover, I mean, fighting with the Kurds up in the early parts of the Iraq War, understanding the decade he spent in and out of Iran with, and understanding the Persians, all that time out of the country, a lot of military type and intelligence types, they look at the country from a distance. He actually came back and knew it intimately. They become a grassroots leader. I mean, that's what I found the most amazing thing about this guy is that how he had not just a deep love for America, but a deep understanding of the working class and really the MAGA movement as a populist nationalist movement. When most guys that do this end up to be globalist, right?
No, it's so true. He never lost that connection. I'd put like Jeff Clark is another guy I would kind of put in that category as well. Someone who's gone to all of, gotten through all of the elite schools, gone through and passed every single elite credential you would want, but never lost touch with their working class roots, never lost touch with that salt of the earth type person that they are. And I think that that's what makes the MAGA movement so special and so important, and why people like Sam Faddis, of course, became leaders in this movement. And Sam Faddis was absolutely a grassroots leader and a patriot leader in this movement because of that specific fact. He never lost touch of his connection with the regular working men and women of this country.
Amazing. Jack, social media, where do we get you? I want to thank you for co-hosting here for the hour. Where do people get you?
Sure, we're up at Jack Posobiec and Getter, Truth Social, Telegram, Instagram. I do want to give people, though, I do have to give a trigger warning and a content warning because I have been getting a little upset with the guy by the name of Mark Thiessen, and people say that's just because of his support for escalating the war and regime change in Iran. No, it's not just that. It's because he doesn't use his actual picture on social media. So what I've been doing is digging up photos of Mark Thiessen, most recently from his favorite band Kiss concerts, and posting them so everyone can just see who Mark Thiessen is.
Oh, wow. This is a whole new element, knowing Mark Thiessen.
Big Kiss fan, apparently. Big Gene Simmons fan. I had no idea, but now we can all know that these are the people who support escalating into full regime change with Iran. So I just want people to know.
Oh, man. Unbelievable. Thank you, Jack. Natalie, you've been nailing it by keeping the main thing the main thing. In fact, I'll play your clips in the next hour. I know you got to bounce. Where do people get you, ma'am? And you're hosting an entire hour about your investigative report at 5 p.m. on Thursday. Where do people go to get you your Substack and your social media?
Thank you, sir. Honor to join. And might I just say, Sam Faddis is an example of what happens when IC members are weaponized to protect America, not against America. And I think that all of his knowledge that he has from all those ops he was running, that's why he was so good at being able to dismantle the left, right? It's not a domestic enemy, it's a foreign one, as sad as that is to say, and he was so good at it. Natalie G. Winters on all platforms, thank you so much for having me.
Natalie, thank you. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. I want to thank our sponsors. We're going to take a commercial break. We got Dr. Thayer. Also, we're going to have people from Pennsylvania that work with Sam on the grassroots movement, and Brian Kennedy is going to join us, Colonel Grant Newsham. In fact, Grant, I think, was at a panel that he was supposed to be on with Sam, I think today, either yesterday or today. Grant's going to join us. We have another hour. We're also going to figure out later in the week to do another hour because I got so many people want to come on and so many great clips. I think we played one clip in the first hour. We have so much great material with the great Sam Faddis. I want to thank Birch Gold into the dollar empire. You see what's happening in Asia. You see what's happening with these chip stocks. You see what's happening with artificial intelligence. Well, look for an alternative, something that's been around for a long time and held its value for a long time. That would be physical gold. Don't talk to me. Talk to the people at Birch Gold. Phone out. 98 Bannon at 989898. You get to Philip Patrick and the team at Birch Gold. Talk to them. Short commercial break. Our special about Sam Faddis next.